Legacy is the sinew that binds us to history. It's one that separates us from the people of most of humanity's existence. It's that corpse to which we owe so much of our present realities, be that good or bad. You take your pick. This text isn't here to make that decision for you, but instead investigate something else of interest. That's Sorcerer Legacy. You see, legacy is just a form of storytelling like all history, really. It's a fable about things that might have once been recontextualized and recompartmentalized into something new, something that we can understand. Of course, many would say its purpose is for morality play, to learn from the mistakes of history, to exonerate the virtues of the past. However, history is hardly so pointed and hardly so directly, practically useful in that sense. It speaks more to our position as storytellers than anything else, adding our own volumes to that tome of scattered leaves bound by love which makes up our understanding of existence. I think that calling it anything else is a little pretentious. There is a monumental figure who might be best used to express this idea in short, that being, of course, why we're in this space in the first place. Jesus Christ, the icon of Christian faith the world over, perhaps the premier known name in the Western canon. Not only is his entire existence totally distant from whatever he was when he was a living man, at least as what is indicated by the brief mentions of him contemporary to when he would have lived, but there are so many different interpretations of him that if he were to exist again suddenly and randomly like the ghost of King Hamlet, it would be a total shock to almost everyone who knew of him. Here in the United States, we might think that there is one interpretation of him, married under God, despite the United States' vastness allowing for millions of interpretations of the man even in just one region of the country. But even if we move our eyes to one of the most familiar to us of the Eastern countries, Japan, we immediately see massive divergences in faith. While most of the country seems to view Christianity in a Western lens, at least out of the people who do observe it, there's a little-known nook of the place, tucked away into the corners of Aomori Prefecture in the town of Shingo. Kiyomaru Takeuchi claimed to discover here a place known as Kirisuto no Haka, what we might call the Sepulchre of Christ. This then led to an even bolder claim that Christ had spent the so-called biblical last years of his life in Japan, living in this tiny hamlet with a modest and classically beautiful Japanese wife. This isn't the only tradition across the world that pertains to the lost years of the Bible, which are a bit of an odd construct throughout Apocrypha, which asserts that a fictional narrative must chronicle the entire life of a man, or else it is missing something, but it is the one that comes to mind almost instantly. The idea that Jesus, instead of dying on the cross like he very well should have in all our conceptions of him and his legend, instead escaped across Siberia and settled down in some small Japanese village to learn the teachings of Taoism is such a stark rejection of everything you or I might understand as fundamentally integral to him as a character. And yet there is a version of the narrative that asserts this. In short, Jesus Christ is an enigma, separated from us by 2,000 years of history and context which completely transmogrifies who he is. Now, this applies as well to digital simulacrum of Jesus Christ as well, of course, and this is where our story begins. In the second act of Homestuck's fifth act, about midway upon the journey of the comic's life, a series of characters of interest to this particular piece are introduced. By now, the reader has become acquainted with the alien species known as the Trolls, little petulant players in the narrative based on the conception of internet trolls. The text then deigns to introduce their ancestors, characters spoken of in myth and legend, entities who we understand through nested narratives and fables, the Charles Foster Kanes of Homestuck's long, grim parable. It is one of these characters who is the star player this evening, a martyr and a supposed hero, not unlike the man of tassels we just spoke of, the Sufferer. This is a messianic figure for the Trolls, a savior who gave sight to the blind and rose Lazarus from his grave. Were he an Alternian alien as opposed to a man of Bethany, chronicled in the Gospel of John, despite his miracles, because of his righteous fight against the caste system which constricted him and his people, him most of all as some kind of aberrant within it. He was eventually executed for his rebellion by the upper castes, a classical revolutionary, killed to stoke the flames of the cause that he uplifted. Or at least, so it would seem. That is the narrative as Homestuck presents it and as the Trolls corroborate it to be. But none of them were present for the Sufferer's descent into death themselves, only there to hear the stories retold to them. Unreliable narrators who have created a mirror of him from his legacy. He is a mythic figure, spellbound into the tapestry of legend. But again, if one could transpose the Sufferer from his time into a more contemporaneous one, then they would be shocked by how he appears. In Homestuck, this conflict, this friction, is eventually revealed, forced from the cave and into the daylight. The Sufferer of another time, of another fiction, ends up becoming a character in Homestuck in the middle of its second half, the third intermission of the sixth act, if anyone's counting. Instead of the brooding and confident figure of righteous fury that he has been mythologized to be throughout the text thus far, he is met as a scrawny, sniveling teenage boy. A teenage boy who, like all teenage boys, is a weak, petulant soul, just like the rest of the Trolls are. So he is revealed for what he was, a person like anyone else. Poor, forked radish, naked and afraid in the face of an empty and uncaring universe. He explicates that fear through concern trolling and annoying behavior in the service of what he perceives to be some kind of online vigilantism, like so many of us do in our broken and compartmentalized youths. Myself and the earlier acts of this channel is a literary project included. He is flawed, and though he may be a satirical caricature, he is still a very human one, even if he is, well, an alien. But, well, and truly that distortion of legacy is so fundamental to the human experience that it is identifiable even within living memory and in the mundane, without the cataclysmic record of millennia to aid in fogging up the glass, so to speak. I once knew a woman, very dear to me for a decade and a half. I looked up to her as a font of wisdom throughout my life, a source of inspiration and courage against all odds. She battled insurmountable tribulations, survived them, and yet eventually she crumbled against them as we all do, in the end by that way of entropy. It was only after she had died that I had learned something about her that completely changed my image of her in its entirety. To me, it was as if I was meeting a true and or honest her, even if it was only after she died, and it completely shattered all the goodwill I had for her. That being, she had a hand in the brutality of the Guatemalan Civil War and the suppression of the Partido Guatemalteco del Trabajo and its associate factions. It was impossible to ever view her as the same person after that. She had become like two people. I guess that's really the truth of all this. You know, living near the ruin of Twin Peaks population 51,201 itself, as personified by North Bend, Washington, one is reminded often of that duality of personhood. The distortions of Jesus Christ, of Cancri Vantas, the sufferer of Homestuck, of anyone really, transfigures them into multiple people. In Homestuck, there are literally two. There is the sufferer, and there is Cancri. There is the woman I knew before she died, and the woman I knew after, the truth of her. When Twin Peaks originally ended, some 30 years ago, it was revealed that there were two versions of the affable, charming protagonist. One was the charismatic figure that the text had followed for its duration, and the other was the truth of him, the violent, destructive Federal Bureau of Investigation entity that had simmered just beneath the surface of his travels through the series. Dale Cooper, lovable man of the Bureau, was just as grotesque as the rest of them. Deep down, 30 years later, when Twin Peaks returned not as a phoenix that rose from the ashes, but as a fetid corpse aching out its motions just to die in a prolonged and inconclusive sentence. This is still true. The other Cooper is revealed to have raped a principal character from the series, exploiting her trust against her just for the purpose of cruelty and control, and kills in cold blood so many just for the sake of killing, the depraved violence of the American Empire on full display. That is the truth of Dale Cooper, and yet it exists at the same time as the facade of his kindness and charity and his faux nobility that endeared us him in the first place, and which is so self-important it leads him to try to be the sole savior of a woman and a legacy at the end of time, against all natural or celestial machinations that beg him not to. Just as Cancri is both the petulant teenager of the sixth act of Homestuck and the brave revolutionary of its fifth act's history, just as Jesus both died in Golgotha and yet lived on across Siberia in a small village in Japan, just as a woman I once looked up to turned out to be someone vile and cruel inside. That is the truth of a legacy, of a nook in the annals of history. It is not some regal hotel nestled away in the fictional margins of some Eastern European border with a beautiful and tragic history to be uncovered by some intrepid writer, should he choose to do so. It's the Lernaea Hydra. When one head is investigated, it is cut off and another two grow in its place. The perspective investigated and the new perspective created from that investigation. The echoes of history come together throughout time. Or, at least, thus speaks this head, deep within the Lake Lerna.